The HOA president had disliked us from the very beginning. But never, in my worst nightmare, did I think she would cross such a line. All over a minor rule, she shoved my pregnant wife's wheelchair. And within just 3 minutes, our lives were nearly destroyed. My wife started bleeding. Our unborn baby stopped moving. And the woman responsible stood there with a clipboard in her hand, refusing to call for help. This is the true story of how one moment of cruelty almost shattered our family. Before watching the full story, comment below and tell me, which country are you watching from? And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this. The autumn sunlight stretched across our quiet suburban street as I gently helped my wife, Emma, settle into her wheelchair. She was 8 months pregnant and still recovering from a horrific car accident that had left her unable to walk. She looked up at me with those brave eyes, the kind that broke my heart every single day. "I just want to feel the sunshine," she whispered, resting her hand over her round belly. "The baby's been kicking all morning. I think she knows we're going outside." I adjusted the blanket on her lap, even though the day was warm. "Then sunshine is exactly what you'll get," I said softly. We had moved into this neighborhood 6 months earlier, hoping for peace after the accident. Doctors warned Emma might never walk again. The pregnancy was already risky, and then one drunk driver changed everything. Still, Emma refused to give up. "David, look," she said gently, pointing at the rose bushes I had planted weeks ago. They bloomed. I smiled, just like you said they would. For a brief moment, everything felt normal. Children laughed in distant yards. Birds chirped. It almost felt like the future we had dreamed of when we first learned we were having a baby girl. Then I saw her. Margaret Blackwood, the HOA president, marching toward us, heels clicking sharply against the pavement, her clipboard clenched like a weapon. In just 6 months, she had made our lives miserable. Fines for grass being barely too long. Complaints about our car crossing the driveway line by inches. Notes about the wrong shade of window blinds. We ignored it all. Until that day. "Mr. Anderson," her sharp voice cut through the air. "I need to speak with you immediately." Emma stiffened. I placed my hand on her shoulder. "Just ignore her," I whispered. But Margaret was already standing in front of us. "Did you hear me?" she snapped. "We're just taking a walk," I replied calmly. "Whatever it is can wait." Her eyes hardened. "No, it cannot. Your garbage bins are still outside. It's 3:47 p.m. They were supposed to be removed by 3 o'clock. This is your 3rd violation." I stared at her, stunned. "My wife needs constant care," I said. "I forgot. Your personal problems are not the HOA's concern," she replied coldly. "That's a $200 fine." Emma spoke up softly. "Please, he's been caring for me day and night." Margaret looked at her with pure contempt. "Maybe if you weren't so demanding," she sneered. "Your husband could meet his obligations." Something inside me snapped. "How dare you speak to my wife like that?" I said. Margaret stepped closer. "I dare because I have authority here." Emma's hand clutched her stomach. "David, something's wrong," she whispered. "The baby." I tried to turn the wheelchair toward our house, but Margaret stepped directly in front of us. "We're not finished." "Move," I demanded. "My wife needs help." She didn't move. Emma cried out in pain. And then Margaret shoved the wheelchair. Not enough to tip it over, but enough to violently jolt my pregnant, paralyzed wife. Emma screamed. I lunged forward, too late. Blood began soaking into the seat beneath her. "The baby," Emma gasped. "There's blood." I screamed for Margaret to call 911. She froze, fear replacing cruelty. I dialed myself, shaking, begging the operator for help as Emma faded in my arms. Neighbors rushed out. Witnesses surrounded us. When police arrived, Margaret tried to deny everything. But witnesses told the truth. "She pushed her," they said. The officer didn't hesitate. "Ma'am, you are under arrest for assault on a pregnant, disabled woman." As they cuffed her, she screamed about authority, about rules. None of it mattered anymore. Hours later, in the hospital, a doctor finally walked toward me. My heart stopped. Then he smiled. "Your wife survived," he said. "And you have a daughter. For pounds. In the NICU. Fighting. Just like her mother." I stood outside the NICU, staring through the glass at the smallest miracle I had ever seen. My daughter lay inside that incubator, barely 4 pounds, covered in wires and tubes. Yet somehow, she was breathing on her own. Every rise of her tiny chest felt like a victory against the nightmare we had just survived. The nurse spoke gently. She's a fighter, just like her mother. My legs finally gave out. I sank into the chair, my head in my hands, shaking, not from fear anymore, but from the realization of how close we had come to losing everything. Minutes later, a doctor led me to the ICU. Emma lay there pale and motionless, machines humming around her. Her arm was wrapped in bandages, for lines running into her veins. For a terrifying second, I thought I was too late. Then her fingers moved. I rushed to her side. Emma, I'm here. Her eyes slowly opened. Weak, exhausted, but alive. Is the baby? She whispered. I smiled through tears. She's alive. She's tiny. She's perfect. Emma let out a breath she'd been holding for months. Tears slid down her temples as she squeezed my hand. I thought I lost her, she whispered. So did I said. But you saved her. You saved both of you. 2 hours later, a police detective arrived at the hospital. He didn't soften his words. Mr. Anderson, the HOA president has been formally charged. Assault, reckless endangerment, and assault on a disabled pregnant woman. Multiple witnesses. Security cameras from nearby homes. There's no denying what she did. I nodded slowly. What happens now? I asked. She'll be removed from the HOA immediately, and the district attorney plans to push for prison time. For the first time since that afternoon, I felt something close to justice. The next morning, news spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Neighbors I barely knew showed up at the hospital with flowers, cards, even meals. One by one, they told me the truth I never knew. She's bullied families for years. She fined elderly residents over nothing. She threatened people who disagreed with her. No one had stood up to her before, until she chose the wrong family. 3 days later, I wheeled Emma, slowly, carefully, into the NICU. The nurse placed our daughter into her arms for the first time. Emma broke down. She's so warm, she whispered. She's real. Our daughter wrapped her tiny fingers around Emma's thumb, and in that moment, every scar, every fear, every painful second became worth it. We named her Hope, because that's what she was. But this story wasn't over yet, because what Margaret Blackwood did didn't just destroy her own reputation. It changed the entire neighborhood forever. A week after my wife's surgery, the truth finally caught up with Margaret Blackwood. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. Not the kind with coffee and polite arguments. This one was different. Angry residents filled the community hall. People who had stayed silent for years were finally speaking up. One by one, neighbors stood. She fined me when my husband was dying. She threatened to lien my house because my grandson's bike was on the porch. She humiliated disabled residents. Then the footage played. Security camera video from across the street. Clear. Undeniable. Margaret stepping forward. Margaret shoving the wheelchair. Emma screaming. The room went silent. The board didn't even debate. Margaret Blackwood was removed as HOA president immediately. Her voting power was revoked. Her authority, gone. But that was only the beginning. 2 weeks later, I sat in a courtroom holding Emma's hand. She was still weak, still healing, but she insisted on being there. Margaret stood in front of the judge. No clipboard, no power, no smug smile. Just fear. The prosecutor didn't hold back. Assault on a disabled pregnant woman. Reckless endangerment. Intentional obstruction of medical care. Witnesses testified. Neighbors spoke. Doctors explained how close Emma and our daughter came to dying. Then the judge spoke. Your obsession with control nearly cost 2 innocent lives, he said. This court will not tolerate cruelty disguised as authority. Margaret was sentenced to prison time, mandatory counseling, and a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board. As she was led away in handcuffs, she finally looked at us. Not with anger, with regret. Too late. 3 months later, we brought our daughter home. The neighborhood felt different. Kinder. Quieter. Human. Neighbors waved. Children laughed again. No clipboards. No threats. Emma sat by the window, holding Hope in her arms, sunlight warming her face. She tried to break us, Emma whispered. But she failed. Hope stirred, stretching her tiny fingers, alive and strong. I realized something then. Some people use rules to control. Others use love to survive. And love always wins.
The story's over. Now let's get real. Imagine standing there on all that land, every inch legally yours. If you were in the owner's shoes, what would you do? Let them stay, sell the homes, or pull some other wild move? Drop your answer in the comments and let's see who's the boldest.